Hello everyone, and welcome to the Contractor Induction. All contractor organizations and individuals must fulfill our contractor safety management requirements before commencing work on any of our sites. It's a legal obligation to avoid causing harm to another, especially through negligence. A duty of care arises where it is reasonably foreseeable that someone would be harmed by one's actions unless one exercises reasonable care. Under the law, we, as a business entity, have a legal duty of care for all workers, including employees, contractors and volunteers, and other persons, such as visitors. Permits are required for all high-risk activities, as discussed on the site induction videos. These must be submitted before works are undertaken. A person under the influence of either drugs or alcohol will be asked to leave the site. All sites are also classified as non-smoking sites. If you choose to smoke, you are required to leave the grounds. First aid response. Contractors are expected to provide their own first aid kits when working on site. However, in the event of a medical emergency, life-threatening, call 000 and request an ambulance. As discussed in the site induction, there are two response plans that you are required to understand. Evacuation and lockdown. Each site will have their own individual plan. DeMartini Fletcher will not tolerate harassment or bullying of any kind. The company policies on discrimination, harassment and bullying apply to all workers and visitors. Contractors are not permitted to park on lawns or in a manner that presents a hazard to others. Follow site parking requirements at all times. Contractors are required to report any and all incidents and injuries sustained during the course of their work to their supervisor immediately. A completed incident and injury report is to be provided via the online form submission within 24 hours of the incident or injury. DeMartini Fletcher is committed to achieving the highest standards of workplace health and safety for all workers and guests. We have an established contractor management procedure to help manage the health and safety of contractors and their workers while undertaking work on site. All contracting organizations and individuals must fulfill our contractor safety management requirements before commencing work on site. The requirements include insurance. Public liability and workers' compensation details must be submitted prior to attending the site and kept up to date. Qualifications. Details of relevant qualifications and training must be submitted to the site by the contracting organization for all workers coming on site that complete high-risk activities. Risk assessment. A job safety analysis, safe work method statement, or suitable risk assessment must be submitted prior to any work commencing. If your company does not have its own standard risk assessment, please submit one via our online form via the building QR code. Induction. All contracting organizations must ensure that all workers coming on site complete this contractor induction program. Contractors must take care of their own health and safety to ensure that their work does not put at risk the health and safety of others. As part of your duty of care, you must consult, communicate and cooperate with DeMartini Fletcher Property on matters relating to health and safety. Do not carry out tasks for which you have not been trained. Report all safety incidents and hazards via the online form accessed via the building QR code or demartini.com.au contractor portal. Take reasonable care to avoid doing things that could increase the risk of or cause injury to others. Comply with all work health and safety instructions, policies and procedures as presented in this induction. Contractors and their workers are required to report any hazards that might cause harm to a person or property. If the hazard is likely to cause serious injury or is life-threatening, contractors must take immediate action to ensure others are not injured. Hazards in the workplace can include faulty electrical devices, plants, or machinery, broken or run-down building infrastructure, blocked or cluttered doorways, and site rubbish. Action might include isolating or removing the hazard yourself, but only if safe to do so. Immediately contact a colleague or your supervisor for further assistance. Submission of the online form is required via scanning of the building QR code and using the hazard form button. Risk assessment. A risk assessment is a defined process of assessing the likelihood and consequence of potential harm or loss to either a person or another object such as infrastructure, planes, or equipment. A safe work method statement is legally required under work health and safety law when undertaking high-risk work. Please submit the required SWMS for approval prior to any work being completed. Personal protective equipment is a control measure that should be used when higher-order controls such as elimination or substitution cannot resolve the risk. Contractors and their workers are required to wear appropriate PPE as per the defined risk assessment, or wear sign posted. Failure to use necessary PPE may result in a contractor being advised to cease work immediately until correct PPE is worn. Mandatory PPE. Safety shoes boots are mandatory for any contractor conducting physical works. For all other occasions are to be worn for specific tasks and or where signposted and or identified via a risk assessment. Clothing can get caught in machinery equipment, and it has the potential to cause serious injury. No loose-fitting clothing is permitted when working with moving machinery. We require high-visibility clothing, as entry via basements and car parks poses a risk of being hurt, and helps to identify contractors on our sites. Long hair is to be tied back when working with machinery. Appropriate gloves must be worn where identified via a risk assessment, or where signposted. Eye protection. The wearing of Australian standard compliant eye protection, face shield, safety glasses, goggle etc. is essential in preventing serious eye injuries while performing certain workplace tasks. Hearing protection. Where high noise exposure levels exist, you will be required to wear a hearing protection device. High visibility vests for contractors who are directing traffic, working with or near mobile plant, or where identified in a risk assessment. High visibility vests must be worn. Head protection safety helmets must be worn in designated areas and or where identified in a risk assessment. A safe work method statement, SWMS, is a document, high risk assessment, that lists the types of high risk work being done, states the health and safety hazards and risks arising from that work, describes how the risks will be controlled, and describes how the risk control measures will be put in place. All high-risk works must be done in accordance with the SWMS. High-risk work includes working at heights of more than 2 meters, demolition work, working in trenches or shafts deeper than 1.5 meters, working with temporary supports for structural alterations, working with powered mobile plant, working with explosives, working in confined spaces, construction of tilt-up or precast concrete. High risk is work that is in, on or near electrical installations or services, roads or railways in use by traffic, water or liquids that pose a drowning risk, telecommunications towers, pressurized gas distribution mains or piping, artificial temperature extremes, chemical, fuel or refrigerant lines. All works that require SWMS must be approved by DeMartini-Fletcher prior to commencement. DeMartini-Fletcher has a process for removing unsafe plant, equipment, or machinery from use, and this is referred to as tagging out. A yellow out-of-service tag is to be used to identify any plant, equipment, or machinery not safe to operate. You may not use any plant, equipment, or machinery that has been tagged out. To do so may put your life and others at risk. This is also considered to be a serious health and safety breach. Only the person who placed the out-of-service tag on the equipment and signed the out-of-service tag is authorized to remove the tag once the equipment is deemed safe. You may not remove an out-of-service tag if you are not the initiator of the tag. To do so is considered a serious safety breach. All chemical containers used at the sites must be labeled in accordance to the Code of Practice for Labeling of Workplace Hazardous Chemicals. All chemicals and other substances must be locked away or out of the reach of children. Food and/or drink bottles must never be used to store chemicals. A permit to work is required for the following high-risk tasks. Hot works. Working at heights where a standard operating procedure has not been developed. Confined space entry. Electrical work. Asbestos or work with silica. Isolation of fire protection equipment. Isolation of mechanical equipment including pumps and air conditioning equipment. You must complete a Safe Work Method Statement, SWMS, or a Job Safety Analysis, JSA, before a permit to work will be issued. All contractors are responsible for their own rubbish removal, access, and parking arrangements, and safety of themselves and others on our sites. We thank you for your cooperation on our sites. Please ensure you keep up to date with all changes and site information via the DeMartini Fletcher Contractor portal www.demartini.com.au.